All right. So first of all, thanks for having me. I prepared a short presentation regarding mobile UX. So yeah, let's dive right in. Few words about myself. My name is Dierks. I'm a lead business analyst at Capgemini with a focus on user experience and usability. I'm currently located in Munich, Germany. And funnily enough, I was attending PACE in 2014-15, where I was writing my master thesis. But I also attended the mobile app design contest back then, and I did a similar presentation, and I also did mentoring. So great to be back. So let's dive right in. Let's start with something very dry here. What is user experience? And we're going to start with the definition. I know a person's perceptions and response that result from the user anticipated use of a product, system, or service. So the essence, what I'm trying to get through here is user experience is not only when you use the product, system, or service, but also before you use the system and even after. So that's something to keep in mind. It's not only during use. Another one that I had is UX is momentary, primarily evaluative, feeling good, bad while interacting with the product or service. So user experience is, as you can guess, very subjective and hard to measure. Like it's very hard to put into numbers. So it's really important to get findings and figure out what users are basically wanting from your application. But let's get away from these definitions and talk about something that you probably all have experienced, like you're trying to open an app or a website and you want to click something and something keeps loading because you have a bad network connection on your phone and you click something else. So this is mobile user experience to you. Very simple. And this is what we're going to be talking about today. More specifically, I called this presentation Kickstart Mobile UX. Why? Because you have a very limited time frame today, and I want to give you a kickstart on how to start designing your mobile app. How do you start? Where do you start? What can you use, right? So when we look at mobile applications themselves, how do we interact with them? Well, we're using touch. It's no clicking, we're using fingers. So you've got to keep in mind the average finger width. So this is the index finger. Obviously, we are also using our thumb, but you need to be cognizant that you're using your finger and you're covering part of your screen with your finger. So there's actually guidelines for how large specific components need to be for touch. So you can see iOS and Android, for example, have like a minimum target size of 44 points. So you want to really keep that in mind, that you don't use small links that you might be able to click on your desktop, but that you can't hit with your finger, right? Also important, since we were just talking about index fingers, is using your thumb, right? This changed a little bit because devices got much larger, but back in the days, I think it was Apple tried to design the iPhone that everything is reachable within like the thumb, moving the thumb. And you can see that here. So you have these zones that are natural or easy to reach at the bottom where you can easily stretch with your thumb. But then you have something where you have to stretch a little bit to get to, and then there's these sections that are really hard to reach and where your phone's almost falling out of your hands, right? So you want to be thinking about where you put your components, your important components that your user needs to be using more often to locate them in one of these sections. Another thing that's different to desktop is obviously screen orientation. You may have heard of vertical video syndrome, so taking videos in the portrait mode, but usually you're used to have them in landscape mode. So this is how you can hold your phone, obviously. It changes the grip, it changes what finger use, the two-handed use, this is one-handed use, two fingers, one finger. So for games and videos, for example, you want to use landscape, whereas when you're browsing or reading, you want to use portrait. Going away from the interaction, like physical interaction, to the interaction, how do we use our phones? You can see that on average, we pick up our phones 58 times per day. What's even more important here is that 70% of these sessions are less than 2 minutes. So it's very short time frames that you're looking at your phone. And if you look even further, you have these longer sessions of, like, for example, this 37 minutes, but these are scattered into very small sessions, like maybe you're waiting on a train and you pull out your phone, you're checking on something, then your train is arriving, you put the phone away or you look away, you get into the train, you go back to your phone, then you need to check for your stops. So it's definitely important to figure out that you need to design your application for disruption and your environment that you're in, because it's easy to get distracted. Going away from the interaction, how do we design for mobile apps? The first starting point should be the iOS and Android design guidelines. So specifically from the people who provided us with the devices have these specific design guidelines. So in this example, you see a bottom navigation bar from Android, and you can see that you can read up in the guidelines, what is the bottom navigation bar used for? What does it look like? What are customizations? So it tells you specifically what components to use for what and what they should look like. So it's a very great starting point when you just want to build your initial layout of the mobile app. Another thing that I love to mention when talking about user experience and usability is the usability heuristics for interface design. These are the ones from the Nielsen group. There's more heuristics, but these ones are very present. And these apply to everything, not just mobile apps, but also desktop apps, web apps, everything. And just to name a few, visibility of system status. You want to show the user that something is loading. So you want to display a loading indicator. Match between system and real world. You want to use terms or icons that the user is familiar with. So you use folders, for example, on a desktop, right, to imitate the real world. Or you're saying you're buying a train ticket. So in the app, it's called a ticket, even though you might not really get a ticket. So keeping in mind these heuristics really helps you elevate your mobile app and your designs. When we talk about desktop and mobile, how it started was that for websites, you started with a desktop application. You said, yeah, we got to fit everything into a mobile app, and we'll just divide it into sections, and then we'll just let the user scroll. So by now, I don't think it's that common anymore, but people think more in the mobile first section, because otherwise what you're going to end up doing is something like this. So you have this website or this mobile application that you just infinitely scroll. And you don't want to do that. You want to think about the mobile app first. You want to think about the content that you want to provide, what's the most important, reachable. And you could scale that into a website. You could add more stuff on the desktop, but you really want to start with the most basic features in your mobile app. A few examples that I prepared that are important for when you're designing for mobile devices is minimizing user input. You can see this little quote, I will do it later on my laptop. So this is usually how I handled it when I've seen like a form like seen on the left, because it's way too cumbersome to enter everything on a mobile phone and then you miss something. So it's quite annoying. So you want to minimize the user input because it's not as convenient on a desktop, but also not only do you want to minimize it, you also want to make it mobile friendly. So you can see on the left, you have these drop downs, right? Month, day, early morning. On the right side, you don't see any drop downs anymore. You can, for example, see the coach, business, and first section. And this is a segmented button. So the user can see right away, what options do I have and what do I want to choose? It's just one click compared to the drop down where you have to open the drop down, see what values are behind it, select one value, go to the next one, right? So it's not about only minimizing it, but also making it mobile friendly. Another example that I don't think is ever outdated is Hamburger Menus. I said specifically no Hamburger Menus. There's situations where you might want to use it, but as you can see, session time increases enormously when you don't use a Hamburger menu, but instead a bottom navigation menu. Same reason as you've just seen for the segmented button, all your options are clearly visible. You can access it within one click. You know exactly what it's there for, and it makes it much easier to browse the app. I think the iOS guidelines still don't have a hamburger menu in there. I think Android has it, I'm not sure, or at least a drawer. You can see that they're really against that sort of stuff, because I've heard this quote that drawers tend to fill with stuff that you don't need, and you just throw everything in there. And the same thing applies here. If you have like a hamburger menu, you feel like, oh, we can put this feature in and this option and this setting, and you're not thinking about the initial idea. You're not limiting yourself to finding the best solution for your problem. And then the last thing, actually, James was already talking about that people really do not like signups, or at least they do not like signups up front. You can see that in this scenario, I found the figure that 54% quit checkout if they asked to sign up. So there's also this story about the $300 million button that I found. So they had this very simple sign up form, and somehow they found out with the analytics that people just stopped the shopping process right there. Like a bunch of people just left the page. So what they did as a fix is they replaced the sign up button with the continue button and a short note saying, you don't have to sign up for the checkout, but future checkouts are going to be more convenient. So you can decide to sign up if you want to, something along those lines, right? And it turned out that they made like $300 million of revenue after doing the change. So try to avoid upfront signups. Signups may be needed, but don't do them like the first thing when people open your app. Now that I've talked a little bit about how you can design, what are some guidelines, what can you look at to design your mobile app, obviously you want to start with your idea. How do you approach the idea? Like you have this initial idea, how do you start? First thing you should be doing is competitor analysis. So that's also something that you can be doing today. You have an idea, you probably heard of somebody else doing something similar. Browse their website, check their apps, look at what they are doing. What are they doing good? What are they doing bad? Why is it working for them? Why is it not working for them? Take notes and take that as a basis for your idea to improve upon. Another thing that you want to be doing is obviously it's called user experience. So you want to figure out who are you designing for. And the best thing to do that is creating personas. You can see as an example here, you have a picture, you have a name, age, you have a short bio. So you want to make it really tangible. Who are you designing for? Like, what is your target user? What is your typical user that you're designing for? But you also want to create like a person that you can empathize with. That's why there's also the picture there, the bio. And then you can see at the bottom, the wants and needs and the frustration sections are specifically targeted towards your idea. Like, what are the pain points that you're trying to solve? Like, what is the added benefit that you want to generate, and how does it affect this user? So also something that you can quickly write down. It doesn't have to be this sophisticated, but at least like think about who are you designing for. And the last thing, the third thing that I think you can do to better understand how to shape your idea before you dive right into designing or developing your idea is that you get some requirements for your mobile application. And you can do that by user stories. You might have heard of user stories as a I want to so that I can. So there's one way to approach it, and this is also commonly used to get requirements. There's another technique that is called job stories, which is quite similar. You can see the structure here. It says when, so the situation, I want to, your motivation, so I can, your expected outcome. What's the difference? Whereas the user stories focus more on a solution, like what do they want to have, the job stories focus more on the motivation, on the problem, like what is the benefit that they're trying to achieve. So just writing down a couple of these job stories or user stories for yourself quickly helps you identify requirements for your mobile app. And with this, you have like, what are others doing? Who are you designing for? What requirements do I need to fulfill for my mobile app? Now that you have all that, you can dive into designing. This is something I think Jonathan is also give a quick introduction, like how can you use your designs, how can you do the prototyping. But the best way to start designing still is a piece of paper and a pen. Start taking notes, do sketches, whatever comes to your mind. You probably have a picture in your head, just put it on paper. It doesn't need to look good, it just needs to help you understand it. And you can do something like sketches in wireframes. So these are wireframes, for example. These are called low fidelity app designs. There's also some templates online that you may want to use, but it helps you understand how do you want to lay out your mobile app, what needs to be covered from your mobile app, what are the functionality that I'm trying to achieve, where do I put all these components. So it's supposed to give you a rough overview on how your app is going to look like. And you can go even one step further, which is using storyboards to create screen or user flows. So you want to use your wireframes or your sketches, and you want to try to depict the most common use cases that your user is trying to achieve with your app. So you want to maybe have a happy flow, maybe you have somebody buying something, maybe you want to also suggest them other solutions. So you want to capture these use cases in your user flow, and these are also going to be important later for your testing. When you want to create more sophisticated designs of your mobile app, you can go away from the sketches and you can use design software. I wrote down Sketch and Figma. I guess you won't be using these today, maybe, and it doesn't have to be this sophisticated. Basically, use whatever you're familiar with. You know, you can basically use anything. You can use PowerPoint, you can use Keynote, you could even use Paint. It really doesn't make a difference as long as you're creating sophisticated designs. But obviously, the more sophisticated the application, the more sophisticated your designs. But just as an example, once you have your sophisticated designs, you can use prototyping software. And the way that it works is you can use your designs and you can mark so-called hotspots. So you can create a section on your design that is clickable. And when you click it, you can link it to another design. And by that, you make it possible for users to be able to click through your mobile app. And it doesn't have to be every scenario. It just needs to be like one common flow that the user can perform. And what it looks like is something like this. You can see that from one screen, we go to the next one, and I am able to click through my designs. Obviously, it's more sophisticated because you have animations in there. But generally, it's enough if you can just click on something and a new design pops up. So it's basically a bunch of simple designs that are linked together. And I heard you're going to be getting a demo with Marvel. I also named a couple others here: Envision, Proto.io, Azure. It really doesn't make that big of a difference what to use there. They're all quite similar. And if you're really exhausted by these prototyping tools and design software, you could also use something like Keynote. I'm giving you an example here, very sophisticated example. So somebody built an ad for Android material design completely with Keynote. Obviously, you're not going to be doing that today, but I just want to show you what's possible. So use the tools that you have at hand, that you're comfortable with. You could just link your designs basically on slides in your Keynote or even PowerPoint. You just put a picture on it. When you click the button, you navigate to the next page. Can be as simple as that. Now that you have the prototype, what would be coming next? I think today's session would end with the prototype and the evaluation of your prototype. But if you go further after this day, what would come next? User testing. We've just heard it from Craig that user testing or user feedback is super important. So what you want to do is you want to use your prototype. You want to create a couple of tasks that your target user group wants to achieve. And you want to observe the users performing these tasks to learn where they have problems, what is working well, what doesn't need adjustment, you know? And this is like the most important thing. And to understand that this day is only your very first iteration. Craig just said, like, you have to iterate, you have to change something and show it to users again. So depending on what problems you figured out with your prototype, you need to start earlier or later in the design process. Do I need to understand the problem better again? Or am I addressing the correct problem, but my design is off? So you will be iterating a lot until you have a let's say, initially releasable mobile application. And even then, you will continue with the next iteration. So it's all about iterating your idea, testing it with users, and improving upon that. So with that said, thanks so much for having me. And yeah, happy designing, happy to answer some questions.